The courtroom clerk's voice cracked mid-sentence. She looked up from her papers, her face draining of color as recognition dawned. Judge Whitmore? She whispered. The iron gavel? My daughter-in-law Rachel's perfectly practiced expression of concern faltered. Her lawyer stopped shuffling his documents. My son Daniel, who had been avoiding my eyes all morning, finally looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. I'm sorry, the clerk said, setting down her pen with trembling hands. I need to inform Judge Patterson that we have a situation. Rachel shot to her feet. What situation? We're here for a simple guardianship petition. My mother-in-law is clearly suffering from cognitive decline. The medical evaluation clearly shows Mrs. Whitmore. The clerk's voice could have frozen the Arizona sun. I've worked in this courthouse for 22 years. I know exactly who Margaret Whitmore is. And I think Judge Patterson will want to handle this case personally. They'd underestimated me. They all had. And that was exactly what I'd been counting on for the past 4 months. 4 months earlier, I'd been watering my roses in the backyard of my Scottsdale home when I first heard them plotting. The house I'd lived in for 38 years sits on an acre of desert landscaping, with a courtyard that carries sound in unexpected ways. That particular Thursday in March, I was tending to my desert beauty roses near the kitchen window, enjoying the cool morning air before the afternoon heat set in. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but when you spend 40 years on the bench, presiding over custody battles and divorce proceedings and every form of human deception imaginable, you develop an instinct for when something is wrong. And something was very wrong with the conversation drifting through my kitchen window. She's 73, Danny. Rachel's voice, sweet as poisoned honey. Did you see her at Easter? She asked your Aunt Karen the same question 3 times. And she couldn't remember where she'd parked at the grocery store last week. Mom's always been a little scattered about everyday stuff. My son's voice, uncertain but willing to be convinced. She's brilliant with legal matters but hopeless with her car keys. That's not new. It's getting worse. And this house, Danny, it's too much for her. All alone in this big place. What if she fell? What if she left the stove on? The property alone is worth $2 million in this market, plus her retirement accounts, the investments from your father's life insurance. I stood very still among my roses, a thorn pressing into my palm. What are you suggesting? Daniel asked. I'm suggesting we help her. Get power of attorney while she can still sign the papers. Move her somewhere safe, with professional care. My cousin works at Sunrise Senior Living. They have a memory care unit that's supposed to be wonderful. Memory care? Rachel, Mom doesn't have dementia. She's sharp as a tack. Is she, though? Really? Danny, I love your mother, but she's not the woman she used to be. Last month, she forgot my birthday. She's been wearing the same cardigan for 3 days. She called me Karen last week. She'd called her Karen because Karen was my late husband's sister, and Rachel had been wearing Karen's favorite color coral, and for just a moment, the light had caught her hair the same way. It wasn't confusion. It was grief, triggered unexpectedly. But Rachel didn't know that. Rachel only saw what she wanted to see. I don't know, Daniel said slowly. It feels wrong, going behind her back like this. It's not behind her back, it's protecting her. And protecting us. Danny, what happens if she gives all her money to some televangelist? Or falls for one of those phone scams? Or drives her car through someone's living room? We'd be liable. As her family, we could lose everything trying to pay for her mistakes. I heard my son sigh. That particular sigh, the one that meant he was about to agree to something he knew was wrong, because it was easier than fighting. Fine. But we do it carefully. We don't want to upset her. Of course not. We'll be gentle. Loving. We're doing this because we care about her. I waited until I heard their car pull away before I went inside. I washed the blood from my palm where the thorn had pierced the skin, and I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd reviewed thousands of case files, where I'd made decisions that changed families' lives, where I'd earned my reputation as the most thorough family court judge in Maricopa County. They called me the Iron Gavel because I never ruled without complete information, because I could spot a lie from across a courtroom, because in 4 decades on the bench, I'd never once had a ruling overturned on appeal. Rachel had no idea who she was trying to manipulate, but I intended to find out exactly who Rachel was. The background check took 3 days. I still had contacts from my years on the bench, private investigators who'd testified in my courtroom, lawyers who owed me favors, a forensic accountant who'd helped me unravel financial fraud in dozens of divorce cases. Rachel Whitmore, née Rachel Dennison, 41 years old. Married to my son for 6 years. No children by choice, she'd told Daniel she had fertility issues, but there was no medical record of any such diagnosis. Previous marriage to a man named Gerald Hoffman, 68, which ended when he died of a heart attack 14 months into the marriage. Rachel had inherited everything, approximately $800,000, and moved from Nevada to Arizona shortly after. Before Gerald, there had been Robert. 72 years old, wealthy from commercial real estate, divorced Rachel after discovering she'd forged his signature on several financial documents. He'd wanted to press charges, but Rachel had agreed to return the money and leave the state. Robert had wanted to avoid the embarrassment of admitting he'd been conned. The records were sealed. Before Robert, there had been Thomas. 75, a retired surgeon in California. His daughter had filed for emergency guardianship after Thomas's new wife tried to have him committed to psychiatric care against his will. Thomas had been rescued just in time. Rachel had disappeared before charges could be filed. I sat in my study, surrounded by 40 years of legal books and family photographs, and I looked at the pattern. Rachel targeted older men, wealthy men, men with some vulnerability she could exploit. Gerald had been lonely after losing his first wife. Robert had been going through a late-life crisis after his business partner died. Thomas had been showing early signs of Parkinson's that made him appear confused to people who didn't know him well. And Daniel. Daniel had been grieving. His father, my husband Richard, had died 2 years ago. Daniel had been lost, adrift, desperately seeking someone to take care of him the way his father always had. Rachel had appeared at exactly the right moment, offering comfort and structure and the illusion of being cared for. My son wasn't Rachel's target, I was. Daniel was just the tool she was using to get to me. I made a cup of Earl Grey, Richard's favorite, which I still kept in the cupboard, and I started planning. The first step was documentation. I installed cameras throughout my house, hidden in books and picture frames, and the carved wooden eagle that had sat on my mantel since my father brought it back from Alaska. I started recording every conversation, every visit, every time Rachel looked at my possessions with calculation in her eyes. The second step was acting. I began to play confused subtly at first. I'd lose my train of thought mid-sentence. I'd forget appointments. I'd ask the same questions twice. I watched Rachel watch me, saw the satisfaction in her eyes every time I seemed to slip. The third step was waiting. For Rachel to make her move, for her to slip up, for her to give me everything I needed. The slip came in May. Rachel had started bringing me food, casseroles, soups, dishes that could easily be reheated. "You shouldn't have to cook for yourself, Margaret," she'd say, all concern and sweetness. "Let me take care of you." The first few meals were fine, but after the third casserole, a chicken and rice dish that tasted slightly bitter, I woke up the next morning feeling wrong, groggy, disoriented. My mouth felt like cotton. My thoughts were slow, syrupy. I recognized the symptoms immediately. I'd presided over enough cases involving elder abuse to know what pharmaceutical manipulation looked like. Benzodiazepines, probably. Something to make me confused, compliant, easy to control. I checked my phone. 4 missed calls from Daniel. My doorbell camera showed him arriving at 9 in the morning, using a key I hadn't given him. My spare was missing from the drawer where I kept it, letting himself in while I was unconscious. The inside cameras showed him photographing me in bed, looking sad and concerned, then going through my desk and taking pictures of my financial documents. My own son. Helping his wife build a case for my incompetence while I lay drugged in my own bed. I threw up. Then I cried. Then I sat at my kitchen table and called the one person I knew I could trust absolutely. "Elena Vasquez," said the voice on the other end. "Elena. It's Margaret Whitmore." A pause. "Judge Whitmore. It's been years. I heard you retired." "Retired, not dead. Though someone is trying to change that. I need your help." Elena Vasquez was the district attorney for Maricopa County. 20 years ago, she'd been a young prosecutor in my courtroom. Brilliant and fierce and absolutely dedicated to justice. I'd mentored her, pushed her, helped her become the formidable attorney she was today. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the background check, the drugging, the photograph. Jesus, Margaret, she said when I finished, what do you need from me? I need this documented. Today's date and time. I am Judge Margaret Ann Whitmore, retired, 73 years old, and I am of completely sound mind. I have reason to believe my daughter-in-law is attempting to gain guardianship over me under false pretenses. I'm voluntarily submitting to a competency evaluation, and I want everything recorded. You want me to build a case? I want you to be ready when I hand you one. This isn't her first time, Elena. She's done this before. She'll do it again unless we stop her. What about Daniel? Is he complicit? The question I'd been avoiding. My only child. The baby I'd held in my arms, the boy I'd watched grow, the man I'd been so proud of. I don't know, I admitted. I think she's manipulating him. I think he believes he's helping me, but he still drugged me, Elena. He still photographed my financial records without my knowledge. Whatever his intentions, his actions are criminal. Do you want to press charges? Against your own son? I want the truth, and I want Rachel stopped. After that, we'll see. The next 3 months were the longest of my life. I continued to play confused. I let Rachel bring me food that I disposed of without eating and replaced with my own cooking, carefully arranged to look consumed. I stumbled over words. I repeated questions. I let Daniel hold my hand and look at me with pity, and I pretended not to notice when Rachel smiled behind his back. I documented everything. Every visit. Every conversation. Every time Rachel mentioned how nice Sunrise Senior Living was, how professional, how safe. Every time she suggested I might be happier with people my own age. Every time she looked at my house, at Richard's art collection, at my mother's antique furniture, at 40 years of accumulated treasures with naked greed. I also documented Rachel's past. I tracked down Thomas's daughter in California, who cried when I told her someone else was being targeted. I found Robert in Nevada, who had never stopped regretting that he hadn't pressed charges. I compiled a file so thorough, so detailed, so devastating that no court in the country could ignore it, and I waited. Rachel filed the guardianship petition in July. She'd found a doctor willing to sign off on a preliminary evaluation, a geriatric psychiatrist named Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been sanctioned twice for ethical violations but still maintained his practice. He'd diagnosed me with moderate cognitive impairment, consistent with early-stage dementia, based on a 30-minute conversation during which I'd played confused, forgetful, and easily overwhelmed. The hearing was scheduled for August 15th. My son and daughter-in-law were asking the court to grant them full guardianship over my person and my property. They wanted control of my healthcare decisions, my financial decisions, my life. What they didn't know was that I'd already filed a counterpetition, and I'd requested that the case be assigned to Judge Harold Patterson, my former colleague, my friend of 30 years, and the one person in the Arizona court system who knew exactly who I was. Which brought us back to that courtroom. The clerk's whispered recognition, Rachel's faltering composure, Daniel's dawning realization that something had gone very wrong with their plan. Judge Patterson emerged from chambers, and I watched his face cycle through surprise, recognition, and a kind of grim satisfaction. "Well," he said, settling into his chair, "this is unexpected, Judge Whitmore. It's been too long." "Harold," I replied, "you look well. How's Nancy?" "She's wonderful. Sends her regards. She still talks about the salmon you brought to our anniversary party." Rachel was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Judge? Mother, what is he talking about?" "Oh, didn't Daniel mention?" I smiled pleasantly. "I spent 40 years on the family court bench, Judge Margaret Whitmore. Some people called me the Iron Gavel. I thought you knew. Danny said you worked at the courthouse. In administration or something." I looked at my son. "Is that what you told her? That I was an administrator?" Daniel's face had gone pale. Rachel never asked for details. I said you worked in family court. I assumed. You assumed she'd done her research. She usually does, doesn't she? Before she targets someone? The courtroom went very quiet. "What is she talking about?" Daniel asked, turning to Rachel. "What research?" "Your Honor," Rachel's lawyer said quickly, "my client is simply concerned about her mother-in-law's welfare. This is a straightforward guardianship petition." "Nothing about this is straightforward." Judge Patterson's voice was mild, but I knew that tone. It was the tone he used right before he eviscerated someone from the bench. "Mrs. Rachel Whitmore, is it?" "Yes, Your Honor. Also known as Rachel Dennison. Previously, Rachel Hoffman, and before that, Rachel Cartwright." Rachel's face went white. "I received some interesting documents this morning," Judge Patterson continued. "Testimony from a Mr. Robert Hoffman in Nevada. Court records from a guardianship case in California involving a Thomas Cartwright. Financial records showing unusual transactions in multiple states. And a very detailed background investigation conducted by someone with 40 years of experience in family law." He looked at me. "Judge Whitmore, would you like to address the court?" I stood slowly, carefully, not because I needed to, but because I wanted Rachel to see me straighten my spine, square my shoulders, become the woman I'd always been. "Your Honor, 4 months ago, I overheard my daughter-in-law and my son discussing how they planned to gain control of my assets by convincing the court I was mentally incompetent. I have recordings of these conversations. I have documentation of my daughter-in-law systematically drugging me with benzodiazepines to create symptoms of confusion. I have evidence of my son entering my home without permission and photographing my financial records. And I have evidence that my daughter-in-law has done this before, at least twice, possibly more times, targeting elderly people with assets, manipulating family members, and exploiting the guardianship system for financial gain." I pulled a folder from my bag. "I'd like to submit this evidence into the record, and I'd like to request that the court immediately dismiss the guardianship petition and refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation." Rachel grabbed her purse and stood. "I don't have to listen to this. Danny, we're leaving." "Sit down, Mrs. Whitmore." Judge Patterson's voice cracked like a whip. "You are in my courtroom, and you will remain until I dismiss you. Bailiff, please ensure that no one leaves." For the next 2 hours, I presented my evidence. The recordings, the background checks, the testimony from previous victims, the forensic analysis of my financial records showing that Rachel had already begun making small, unauthorized transactions from a joint account Daniel had added her to. The medical report from my own doctor, not Dr. Webb, but Dr. Sarah Chen, who had conducted a thorough competency evaluation and found me to be in perfect cognitive health. I also presented the footage from my hidden cameras, Rachel bringing me drugged casseroles, Daniel photographing my documents, the two of them discussing how quickly they could sell my house once I was settled at Sunrise. By the end, Daniel was crying. Rachel was sitting rigid and silent, her lawyer looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "Is there anything you'd like to say, Mrs. Whitmore?" Judge Patterson asked Rachel. She said nothing. "Mr. Daniel Whitmore? Anything?" My son looked at me with tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I didn't," she said. "You'd be happier. She said we were protecting you. I never wanted to hurt you. You just let your wife convince you to drug your own mother." I kept my voice gentle, even though my heart was breaking. "You let her convince you to steal my financial records. You let her convince you that the woman who raised you, who loved you, who spent 40 years fighting for families in this courtroom, was nothing but a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own life. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "I know you are, sweetheart. But sorry doesn't undo what you did." Judge Patterson cleared his throat. "The guardianship petition is denied. I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. Mrs. Rachel Whitmore, I strongly suggest you retain separate counsel. And Mr. Daniel Whitmore, I'd suggest you do the same." He looked at me. "Judge Whitmore, thank you for your thorough presentation. This court recognizes your competency, your integrity, and your 40 years of distinguished service. You are free to go." I gathered my papers, walked past my crying son, walked past my rigid daughter-in-law, walked out of the courthouse into the Arizona sunshine where Elena Vasquez was waiting. "It's done," I said. "Rachel's been arrested for elder abuse, fraud, and assault. The other states are filing charges too. She's not getting out anytime soon. And Daniel?" Elena's face softened. "That's up to you. We can charge him as an accomplice or offer him a deal in exchange for testimony against Rachel. He's cooperating fully. Says he had no idea about her past, about the drugging, about any of it. Do you believe him?" I believe he's a man who was manipulated by someone very skilled at manipulation. I believe he made terrible choices because he wanted to believe he was doing the right thing. And I believe he's genuinely devastated by what he did to you." I looked back at the courthouse, at the building where I'd spent my career, where I'd fought for justice, where I'd tried to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. "Don't charge him," I said. "But he needs therapy. Real therapy. And he needs to understand that trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild." 3 weeks later, Daniel came to my house. He stood on my doorstep looking 10 years older than he had in that courtroom, thinner, shadows under his eyes, but also somehow more present, more real than he'd been since Rachel came into his life. "Mom," he said, "I know you probably don't want to see me, but I needed to tell you something." "Come in," I said. I made lemonade. We sat in my garden, among the roses I'd been tending when I first overheard his betrayal. The desert sun was gentle in the late afternoon, and hummingbirds darted among the flowers. "I started therapy," he said, 3 times a week. "My therapist says I have attachment issues, that I was so desperate for someone to take care of me after Dad died that I didn't see what Rachel really was. What was she? A predator. She targeted me because of you, because of your money, your house, your age. I was just all the way in." "I know. I didn't, though. I really didn't." He set down his lemonade, his hands shaking. "I thought I loved her. I thought she loved me. I thought we were helping you. Every time she suggested something, it made sense. You were getting older. You were alone. We were being responsible. You were being manipulated. That doesn't excuse what I did." "No, it doesn't." Silence stretched between us. "I went through everything," Daniel said quietly. "All the records from her previous marriages. Thomas Cartwright almost died. Robert Hoffman lost everything and had to start over at 70. Gerald Hoffman, the medical examiner, ruled it a heart attack, but now they're reopening the case." I looked at my son, at the grief and guilt written across his face. "You didn't know," I said, "about any of that. I should have. I should have asked questions. I should have trusted you instead of her." "Yes, you should have." He flinched. "But Daniel." I reached over and took his hand. "You're my son. Your father was the love of my life, and you were the greatest gift he ever gave me. I spent 40 years on the bench watching families tear themselves apart. I know what unforgivable looks like. This isn't unforgivable. This is human. Stupid and hurtful and human. Can you ever trust me again? That depends on you, on whether you do the work, on whether you become someone trustworthy." I squeezed his hand. "Your father believed in you. He believed you would grow into a good man. I want to see you prove him right." 6 months later, I got a phone call from Elena Vasquez. "Margaret, I need a favor." "Name it." "The state bar is putting together a task force on elder abuse in guardianship cases. They want someone with judicial experience and personal experience to help develop new protocols. I thought of you immediately." "You want me to tell a room full of lawyers that my own daughter-in-law tried to scam me?" "I want you to help protect other people from going through what you went through. Margaret, elder abuse is an epidemic. Most victims don't have your resources or your expertise. If we can train lawyers and judges to recognize the signs, we can save lives." So I did. I stood in front of 200 attorneys at the Arizona State Bar Conference and told them my story, about Rachel's pattern, about the drugged casseroles, about my son's complicity and my daughter-in-law's calculated cruelty, about how even a retired judge, even someone who spent 40 years fighting for families, could be targeted. "The key," I told them, "is documentation. If you suspect elder abuse, document everything. If a client seems suddenly confused only when certain family members are present, document it. If you notice unexplained financial transactions or changes to estate documents, document it. We are officers of the court. We have an obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves." After my presentation, a young attorney approached me. She was crying. "Judge Whitmore," she said. "My grandmother. She changed her will last month, left everything to her new caregiver. We thought she was just being difficult. But now I'm wondering." "Document it," I told her. "Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. You're not overreacting. You're protecting someone you love. That night, I called Daniel. How's therapy going? Hard, good. Hard and good. He laughed, and it almost sounded like my son again. My therapist says I need to develop better boundaries, learn to recognize manipulation, stop looking for someone to take care of me, and learn to take care of myself. Smart therapist. She's terrifying. Reminds me of you, actually. I smiled. Daniel, I have a project I'm working on. Training attorneys to recognize elder abuse. I could use someone who understands how the manipulation works from the inside. Would you be willing to help? A long pause. You want me to stand up in front of lawyers and tell them I helped my wife try to steal from my own mother? I want you to help make sure other families don't go through what we went through. You have insight that I don't. You know what it feels like to be manipulated, to rationalize terrible decisions, to convince yourself you're helping when you're actually harming. That perspective is valuable. I don't know if I can do that. Think about it. No pressure. Another pause. Dad would want me to, wouldn't he? Turn my worst mistake into something that helps people. Yes, he would. Okay, I'll do it. We presented together 3 months later. Me with the judicial perspective, Daniel with the psychological one. The room was packed. I told myself I was being a good son, Daniel said to the audience. That's how it works. You don't wake up one day and decide to commit elder abuse. It happens slowly. A suggestion here, a rationalization there. Someone you trust telling you that you're being responsible, that you're protecting them, that this is what good family members do. And before you know it, you're photographing your mother's financial documents and telling yourself it's for her own good. People asked questions. How do you recognize when concern becomes control? How do you maintain healthy boundaries with aging family members? How do you protect yourself from manipulation? We didn't have all the answers, but we had our story. And stories, I've learned, are more powerful than statistics. Today, I'm 74. My roses are blooming. Daniel comes to dinner every Sunday, and we're rebuilding trust slowly, carefully, the way you rebuild anything that's been broken with patience and attention and the determination to do better. Elena and I have started a consulting practice, helping attorneys and judges recognize elder abuse in guardianship cases. We've worked on 23 cases so far, stopped 8 fraudulent guardianships, helped prosecute 3 predatory caregivers, connected 12 families with resources before the abuse could escalate. I'm not on the bench anymore, but I'm still fighting for justice, still cutting through deception to find the truth, still protecting people who need protecting. They used to call me the Iron Gavel because I was firm, fair, and unbreakable in the courtroom. Now they call me the Iron Gavel because I hammer down on anyone who tries to exploit the people I'm sworn to protect. Age doesn't diminish competence. It just adds experience. And experience, wielded properly, is the most powerful weapon of all.